Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation for the Latin American Forum. Thank you for my guests in the city. Congratulations. In Paraguay, you are trying to promote second generation reforms. In Argentina, and I think that in Mexico also, with our friends, we're trying to fight with first generation reforms. We're trying to have an open economy to trade, fiscal consolidation, and flexible labor laws. So right now, another time has been congratulations. During this year, I will run for the presidency in Argentina, and my speech will be concentrated on what Argentina needs to do to promote sustainable growth, an issue that Argentina has avoided during the last 80 years. In this chart, I will show to you why Argentina is an economy in a permanent decline in the last 80 years. During the first part of the last century, since the beginning of the 19th century until the middle of the 20s, Argentina ranks in an average in the 6th position in the world ranking of GDP per capita. In an average, Argentina ranks the 6th position in this ranking. But since the middle of the last century, with the first government of Juan Domingo Perón, Argentina began a steady decline, and right now the position in this GDP per capita world ranking is very near 70. What had happened in Argentina in the last 80 years, which has been causing this shocking decline? We are promoting during the discussion in the following months in the presidential elections what Argentina needs to do to promote sustainable growth. Right now in Argentina we are in recession. But it's not a short-run recession. I think that the most important issue is to do something to avoid another 80 years of permanent decline. And these are the things that we are going to discuss within my party and for the population in Argentina during this year. We identified three main reasons why Argentina has been this economy in a permanent decline in the last 80 years. First of all, Argentina, due to a wrong strategy to promote industry substitution or industry protections, has became an economy very close to trade. One of the most important reasons why emerging markets has had sustainable growth in the last 50 years is to be open to trade. So Argentina began to close the economy year by year in the last 80 years. So right now only Argentina export very near 10% of the GDP, when very near the crisis of the Great Depression, Argentina export represented 70% of the GDP. Of course, another way to measure how close is an economy to trade is comparing export against GDP or imports against GDP. So, because to promote sustainable growth in exports, you need to be an economy very open to imports. But not due to the retaliation process. It's only an economic issue. For example, another way to see the Argentine decline to commercial trade is to see the percentage of Argentine export on world exports. At the middle of the last century, the Argentine export represents very near 3% of total world export, and right now they are near 0.36%. Well, the second issue where Argentina has been a very important economy in decline is due to fiscal crisis and financial and economic and currency crisis that Argentina suffered in the last 80 years. The same 80 years of economic decline. In this chart, you can see the fiscal results from the consolidated governments. So the federal government, provinces, and municipality. When you see the blue line very near the zero, you have an equilibrium in the fiscal side. Below the 0%, you have a fiscal deficit, and above the zero number, you have a fiscal surplus. As you can see, Argentina, with the exception of the Nestor Kirchner administration, every year in this period since 1961 has a fiscal deficit every year. But if you compute that Argentina during the Nestor Kirchner administration was in default, and if you compute the accrual for interest on accrual basis, Argentina in the whole period has fiscal deficits. It is an important issue, but most important are the crises which this fiscal deficit and steady growth has produced. The Rodrigazo at the middle of the 70s, the crisis of the Tablita, the Martinez Dios during the beginning of the 80s, at the end of the 80s, the hyperinflation, the crisis of the convertibility plan at the end of the 90s, and the crisis that we have in the last year during 2018. You can account 1 crisis, 2 crises, 3 crises, 4 crises, 5th crisis in these 50 years. A crisis in an average every 10 years. Another issue that you can see in this chart is that very near the crisis, fiscal deficit began to be bigger and bigger. After that, after the crisis, there is a sensation that the fiscal deficit began to reduce. But after that, at another time, they began to grow until another crisis. So around the crisis, we have a circle with reducing with an increase in the fiscal deficit, and after that, a reducing in fiscal deficit. But at the end, we have another crisis. Every plan, it is another important issue, I think. Every plan in the last 50 years has ended with a crisis. The crisis of Rodrigazo, the crisis with Lorenzo Sigo at the Ministry of Economy, the crisis, the hyperinflation, or the crisis of the Austral plan during the 80s, the crisis of the convertibility plan, and the crisis and the currency crisis within the Macri administration. So a very important issue of this chart is Argentina needs to avoid fiscal deficit to avoid financial and currency crisis. The problem is how to reduce fiscal expenditure due to the tax pressure is on a sustainable level. So it is a political issue that in my party will front during this election year. Argentina is in decline in the last 80 years. It has not flexible labor laws. This chart shows the labor cost of Argentina comparing with other countries, and Argentina ranks in the first place in the world. Argentina has the most important, the highest labor cost in the world. It is very difficult for a company in Argentina to compete with a foreign company due to one of the reasons of this incredible labor cost. So, arriving at that point, what has been happening in Argentina in the last 80 years? Well, Argentina has been suffering not as a vicious circle, but a vicious triangle. A triangle component by adjustment or crisis, after a plan, a rebound, and a sustainable growth, a period of deterioration before having another crisis, or with the government making another adjustment. For example, after the hyperinflation, it has been a very important crisis, and after that, Argentina experienced an important rebound during the competitivity plan between 1991 and 1998. But since 1999, Argentina began to suffer a deterioration, and after that, at the end of the 90s, suffer another crisis, the worst crisis in our history. But after this crisis, Argentina experienced an important rebound, and a sustainable important rebound, because Argentina since 2011 is stagnated. And after this deterioration, Argentina suffered another crisis in 2018 within the presidency of Mauricio Macri. So this triangle represents the Argentine history in the last 80 years. Another way to see the same triangle, but comparing with another phrase, another view of our decline, our vicious triangle, is to notice that our decline is due to industrial protectionism. Another reason of our economic decline is unemployment and broken public sector. Every year fiscal deficit with unsustainable tax pressure. It is impossible for the private sector to pay the taxes. And additionally, labor laws that Perón incorporated from the Carta del Laboro. Right now, these kind of laws are unsustainable. Argentina needs more flexible laws. Another way to see the vicious triangle that nevertheless, this Argentine economic decline, there are winners within this decline. The winners are some kind of private entrepreneurs. Some of them are in jail right now. Politicians, some of them are in jail right now. And labor unions, not all labor unions, but the most important, of course, and some of them are in jail right now. But what is the opposite direction that Argentina needs to have or to take abroad to promote sustainable growth and to abandon this decline comparing with the following 80 years? I am totally convinced that as a small economy, the only way to promote sustainable growth is to be a free trade economy. We need to open our frontiers to imports. That is the only way to promote exports and to be an economy that promotes sustainable growth. But to avoiding crisis due to free trade openness, we need an affordable public sector with zero deficit. We need a fiscal adjustment with expenditures, and we need additionally labor flexibility. I think that Argentina, after 80 years trying to promote sustainable growth within this system of industrial protection and unpayable, unbroken public sector and labor laws with the Carta del Laboro of Mussolini, Argentina needs to change the direction of what Argentina is going to do for the followers in this direction, which is the direction that the sustainable economy has decided in the last century. Thank you very much.